Welcome to Offshore Explorer with Scott Dodgson. Today we're going to tackle a subject that a lot of us don't know a lot about, but it has a pretty big effect on our boats and how we go about doing our business on boats. And that is surveys and surveyors. I'm going to get into some nitty-gritty on that. I want to thank all the people that have been so generous in purchasing both my short story, The Mosaic Artist, and my novella, The Casket Salesman. They're available on Amazon Books, and Kindle. You can get them actually for free on Kindle, part of a marketing plan. But I just had a big thing happen. I have one of my short stories that, if you remember going back, The Importance of Place, when I talked about semi-Greece, I wrote it as a short story and it's been published. Very excited. It's been published in Live Encounters, a very worthy and upscale magazine. It's in the American Poets and Writers edition this month. And the Mark Ulysses, who I send out a big thank you to, and my dearest and probably oldest friend, David Rigsby, who you remember. We did a show with David talking about poetry in the sea. And David did that, so that it's been published, and it's a big deal for me to have a short story published. I'm very, very happy about it. The music opening was Paulette McWilliams. Paulette's doing fantastic. She has her new album. It's sort of rolling along right now, A Woman's Story. I urge you all to sort of take a peek at it. She's also done a couple of concerts and some songs that you could find on YouTube. I'll put the links in the descriptions. But this is the first podcast in the first of January, and a lot of stuff is going on, an awful lot of stuff. I think it's going to be a really great year. I want to keep my head up. But one of the things that kind of got me thinking about this is that there's always the first person you get to meet, first professional maritime person you get to meet, usually is a surveyor, especially when you go to buy a boat. The surveyor, it's like, who is this guy or gal? What are the regulations? What's going on? Where do I stand? I'm a buyer. It's to protect me. Is it really? And, there's a lot of questions that one might have about being a surveyor. And that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk a little bit about what surveying is and the regulations and how that fits into both buying, a 27-foot sailboat to buying a 200-foot mega yacht. So the question is why is there a survey? How do I use it? And what reasons are there to follow the surveyor around when he's actually doing his work? Something I really recommend, because surveyors do their job by they're inspecting every aspect of your boat. And there is a system that the surveyor does, and he's got a form, he's checking stuff off. And at the end of the day, he's going to have a list of things that probably need to be fixed or addressed at some point. And it's real important to be able to, as a new boat owner or a future boat owner, to be able to understand what he's looking at, how he's going about it, and where we're finding, the problems, and how does that affect you, and the price and the insurance and all the rest of that. So surveyor is a big deal, because that's your first real legal piece of paper that will follow the boat. Now, there's something I want to emphasize here for every boat owner. is to keep a very accurate log, a maintenance log, a travel log, event log, a weather log. Now, if you're only using the boat on, say, in the weekends or once a month, or you're living aboard, writing in your log every day seems sort of, it just seems hard to do. It's just like I don't have really anything to say. But that's why logs are logs. They're there so that you record your daily activity on the boat and the maintenance. And part of the log will be the surveyor's report. And you can address in your logbook how to deal with the notations that the surveyor has written down and suggestions on how to, or what things to repair and to make your ship shipshape. So that's a very key thing. So I want to emphasize the logbook. Even if you're not leaving the dock, you go down, right? I showed up Tuesday, January 4th, 0930, and I did, check the bilge, check the oil, make sure that the batteries had water in them, blah, 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 blah. I did the maintenance, whatever. And I went home at 1:30 after having lunch, period. Done. You don't have to be, it's not a journal. You're not there saying, my wife won't let me go out with the boys and I can't play poker. And that stuff that's not for a log. That's for a journal. So it's just very dry, very short. This is my location. This is the time. This is what I did. This was the weather. This is it. I was at the dock. I haven't moved the boat in 2 months. Blah, 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 blah. That's it. But you write in it every day. And the reason this is important, is really important, is a detailed logbook is probably the most important tool that you have in your toolbox for when you go to sell the boat. Because a buyer is going to come, they're going to look, and if there's no logbook, it's just a thing. And, the value of the work that you put into it is not going to be seen, okay? Because you're going to want to get money back for the value that you put in the boat. And this is a mistake a lot of people make, because if you have a really good logbook that's detailed, that says, yeah, I replaced this pump, on December 10th, 2020, and its service life is, X, and I've been, I've been out to sea and it's been running Y, and all the rest of this stuff, a smart buyer is going to come and say, okay, that pump is in good shape. That's good. So that's a positive. And you want to do that. You can do that, replaced sails on, August 14th, cut a new jib, went from 1/4 ounce to 1/2 ounce, all sorts of little details like that. Anytime you bring something down to the boat, it should go into either your maintenance log or your regular log. And oftentimes the logbooks have those right there. So this is, in general, this survey, or surveyors, and the logbook are the papers that go with the boat. And I think a lot of people sort of dismiss this. But if you're sailing a boat that is uninspected, okay, which most pleasure boats are uninspected. I mean, you can go and get your, Coast Guard auxiliary inspection. They're going to do certain things. They're going to look at certain things, but it's not what I would call, it's a safety inspection as opposed to a mechanical inspection. And there's a lot of different things that go into what is an inspection. So basically, it's a periodic survey, okay? And they're carried out to ensure basically safety and seaworthiness. Those are the overall concepts of what a survey does. And there's so many maritime laws, and they're becoming very more and more stringent, and with every passing year. So seagoing vessels, whether you're just going through out in the Chesapeake Bay, or you're in New York, or you're Bar Harbor, or you're down in the Keys, or you're off the coast of Galveston, whatever the case may be, wherever you're sailing. Don't forget the Great Lakes. It's important that you meet some of the minimum requirements. Now, I want to say this is that I'm going to get into some detail that really applies specifically to larger ships, to tankers, to container ships, any large commercial vessel that is required to have an inspection. My buddy Tim B at Sea, who's got the great YouTube channel and runs a tugboat and talks about some of these details a lot of times. This is a part of what being a professional captain is. Now, not everybody that's listening to this show is a professional captain or wants to be a professional captain. But there is a lot of value in understanding, because it's all interconnected, is understanding the scope of what these compliance measures are, so that you can feel safe and confident and calm of mind no matter where you sail and no matter what kind of weather you're in. So an annual survey is classified by what they call a society. And it's a part of the ship's trading eligibility. So they have to have periodic surveys and certifications by each one of the classification societies, which is in the IMO, which is the International Maritime Organization. And you've got to have the regulations met, and you have to have the endorsements. I will say that when I took over running a Perini Navi right out of the yard. I helped actually build it, and I'll talk about that in a second. That I had to meet so many regulations for that vessel, which was 160 feet long. It was a sailboat. And a big boy, beautiful, beautiful, beautiful yacht. Absolutely beautiful. And the builder, of course, is building Perini Navi, was building to all the specs that were necessary to get the boat certified, because without the certification, you can't get insurance, and without insurance, you can't leave port. So for these types of vessels, you have to have all the certifications, and they fit in one big folder. And this is a big part of being a captain. It's a big part of having a boat, is keeping the paperwork, logbook, certifications, classifications, and compliances. And you often will get the notices once you get set up. You'll get notices on your vessel, things to beware on your vessel, in terms of fire extinguishers or lifeboat equipment and all the rest. So you have all these various certificates, and trust me, they will come once you get into it. The surveyor will help you set up to see where your vessel is going to meet the regulations. But some of the key things are first of all, safety equipment. The safety equipment survey is a very important one. It applies to anybody, whether it's an inspected boat or a non-inspected boat. And safety equipment survey means fire extinguishers, having those up to date. It means having the inboard fire extinguishers that are built in, checked and serviced. It requires all the electrical stuff and the connections for electrical to see if there's a fire. The one thing that scares me the most on a boat is electrical. It's not sinking. It's not howling winds, and it's not giant seas. Okay, those I can manage. I can't manage a fire. I had a very good friend who is a skipper, and he had just taken delivery for his owner of 240-foot mega yacht. Beautiful, beautiful vessels, all fiberglass vessel. And they were moving across the Ionian Sea. They had just come out of the Corinth Canal in Greece, which should be on your bucket list to go see at least, and maybe go through, because it's freaky. I mean, I believe the widest boat that can get through is 43 feet. It seems awfully small, even when you're taking a small boat. I took a Falcon 90 through there one time, and with the sheer walls and the dirt, and it seems very soft, and it seems almost temporary, but it's not temporary. It's been there for a very long time. I don't know the exact age, but it was literally dug by hand. And it's a really interesting place, and it sort of separates between one part of Greece to another part of Greece. But I only bring this up because a lot of moving between countries, sometimes you get inspected. Very important that you have all your papers together. And one of the key things to remember is your flag is the designator for the rules and regulations. So if you're an American flagged boat or vessel, okay, you go by the American standards. If you're British flag boat, you go by the British flag boat. If you're some other boat, you go by some other flag, whatever the country is. Because all the countries have gotten together, and they're called flag states, and they have set up an international rule. This is what the IMO is, International Maritime Organization, so that all the requisite certificates and revalidations or issues are all within international regulations. They go down to things like the height of your safety lines, the length of your fire hose, the size nozzle on your fire hose, for example. All of these things have been all developed. There's still nuances between American, British, Canadian, for whatever, Mexican, but for the most part, the average boater is not going to have to deal with that. This is something that has to deal with the mercantile fleet, container ships and tankers, etc. But you never know when you're going into a port that you're not going to have a port captain who's going to have a little axe to grind, and he's going to see you, and he's going to start whipping out these regulations for his country and saying, we're going to, do your boat, pound your boat in, blah, 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 because you don't meet these regulations. I had an incident like that in Morocco, where I had a port captain literally try to tell me that there was all these discharge regulations, and that he had the right to change whatever the pumps were and the size of the discharge hoses, and just like all sorts of silly ass shit. But he knew, and I knew, that I was an American flag boat, and the regulations for which I was operating under were American. And this is an important thing to remember whenever you go, because there are people who know the regulations, and there are people in foreign ports that have a little, they're not so happy to see you, or so genuine and nice, and they just want to make your life rough. So understanding what it is that you're dealing with, and understanding what the bases are will give you the ammunition to move forward and resolve whatever situation you have. So understanding the flag, that's important. So what is a surveyor actually looking for? Well, the primary thing a surveyor is looking for is construction. How well your boat, in terms of structural strength, if there's excessive corrosion on the deck and hull fittings, the condition of watertight doors, bilge pumps, drainage systems, fire protection equipment, and fixed and portable fire equipment. Sort of the general list. So let's take structural stuff. Now, a lot of us sail with a fiberglass bottom vessel, and you'll notice that the surveyor, after the boat is hauled out, will go along the hull of the boat, and he will be tapping the hull with a little hammer and listening to what the results are. And what he's looking for are blisters. Blisters are indication of the quality of the fiberglass. Do all boats get blisters? No. Blisters can come with a lot of older boats. It's where water gets up underneath the fiberglass itself, the layer of fiberglass, and creates a blister. Now, the way you get those blisters out is, just like popping a zit. You pop them, grind it, and then fill it, and then smooth it, and that's how you do it. Very simple. You can have a lot of blisters. You can have really small blisters. You can have some giant blisters. I had actually my rudder, which is something people don't often check. They're busy looking at the hull, but all the rudders usually have, no matter what the shape of the rudder is, they will have a stainless steel bar that goes through to hold the rudder to the steering vane, and inside that it's fiberglass is around the stainless bar, and sometimes water gets in there. I had that happen with mine, and I had very large rudder, and water got in there, and it took. I must have worked for about 3 days in grinding that sucker, and literally almost came to the point where I was actually rebuilding it. And it's a very important, because water can get in between. If it's not perfectly sealed correctly, could get in between the stainless bar that is connecting it to the boat, right? And in the fiberglass. And as a friend of mine had happened, he was off the coast of, actually he was off the Azores, and in a Beneteau, and his rudder broke. That stainless steel bar that creates the rudder that comes down from the boat itself, it broke because of water damage inside the stainless bar itself, and he lost his rudder while at sea in the middle of the night. He eventually made it in. If you know the Beneteaus, they have that nice sort of curved platform at the bottom and behind and on the stern of the boat. So he put on his dinghy motor on there, and he used his dinghy motor as sort of a rudder, and he managed to get into the Azores. Ended up having to wait for 6 months to literally get a rudder, and decided to stay in Horta, and he still lives in Horta of all that. So it's a kind of a funny story how that happened. But that's sort of the main thing that the surveyor is going to be looking for on the outside. He's going to be looking at your control and steerage cables. This is also a very, very important thing. He'll inspect the stainless steel wires. Now, I said previously that it's important for you to follow behind him and to take notes. You're going to get a survey report. It's going to say, okay, you have to replace the DC pump on the hydraulics. Okay, it's going to say that let's say the little belt that runs the DC pump that moves the hydraulic arm for your rudder is defective. Okay, it needs to be replaced. Well, you can write that down on your own. He's going to write it down for you. But this is something that you have an expert looking at your boat in detail. Okay, some of the stuff, don't get me wrong, some surveyors are good, some surveyors are bad. Most are pretty good. Okay, I actually was what they call a captain's surveyor. It's a thing that happens in Europe, in which not only was I a surveyor and I took all the courses, but I was considered a captain's surveyor. So what I did was I was a surveyor that represented the owner on building a boat. Now I have built, I have built close to 8 boats from scratch, where I have been the captain and sort of behind the yard in watching them build a boat. And they have all sorts of clever tricks in the yard to do stuff that you don't get the value of your boat that you want. Where you think it should be stainless steel, the exhaust out of the engines was made of regular steel instead of stainless steel. The exhaust tubes, and a year later they rotted out and blew up. So it was just because the yard manager, who was very clever, knew that they would last about a year, and that nobody would really inspect them because they're all wrapped in heat-proof fabric and asbestos and blah, 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 and you'd never see it, and he'd be long gone from that. So that was a lesson to be learned. I learned also the fact that when the shortcuts one can take when putting a new engine in and aligning the shaft to the prop, there's a lot of little tricks and shimmies and stuff like that can happen, and it'll pass inspection. It'll even pass going out and doing sea trials and stuff like that. But about a year or 2 years later, you'll find your engine is sort of misaligned to the transmission, and you don't know why. It's because they use these cheap little shimmies, and they compress over time and weight and vibration, and they throw your shaft off, and going into the transmission too. That was with a Z drive. So this is the sort of stuff that a good surveyor will be able to see. Another thing a surveyor is going to do is look at all the electrical. He'll go to the panel. He'll see how well it's wired, whether the connectors are clean. Is there any water damage? Is there a leak from the deck down into the electrics? Lots of different things. Now, he'll go through every single closet, look in the closet, look for water damage, because water damage in a closet is going to indicate that the deck has got a leak in it. Very hard to see if you've got teak on your deck, if there's any leaks. On my boat, on my CT, if I came in on a port tack and I anchored and it rained, it would leak in the aft cabin. If I came in on a starboard tack and anchored and it rained, it wouldn't leak. Go figure. I spent a fortune until I eventually pulled all the teak off the deck and replaced it in trying to stop this mysterious and weird leak. And you'll find that this is the case of a lot of boats. Boats move, they flex. It's expected. Another area that he'll be looking at is your watertight hatches. How is the rubber around your watertight hatches? How does your hatch fit tight? Is it snug? Is it going to be able to take the water? As well as going through the rigging, the lines, the service of the lines, what the blocks look like. A lot of times when you're going to buy, especially a used sailboat, for example, there's going to be the boat's probably has been sitting for a while, and maybe a long time, maybe it wasn't used very often. And that's the worst thing that can happen to a sailboat or to a powerboat, is not being used. They all run better, and you require less maintenance when they're constantly running. I found that over the 18 years that I was chartering and sailing back and forth across the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, that my systems and how dry my boat was, and of course I was constantly, trying to improve on things and change things and make them better and all the rest of that kind of stuff. But for the most part, um, using the electricity, using the pumps, and using everything else actually was very, very good for the boat itself. And I never had any problems with things like rust. It's always very aware of galvanic corrosion, and replacing the sacrificial zinc plates. All that sort of stuff. You get into a system. You get into the system on how to maintain your boat, and if you're at it regularly, it becomes a lot easier. It does take attention, but it becomes a lot easier. And this is the reason why you need to keep a logbook. Because I'll tell you, the surveyor, if there's a good logbook, the surveyor will go and look at the logbook. And if it's right, the logbook's right, he's just going to pass an eye over it. Just look at things, make sure it's okay, because he'll know that this boat was really taken care of. It's a little bit like a car in a sense. You can always tell whose car has been kept in good shape. Now, the next thing is, besides the fire equipment and keeping your fire extinguishers up to date. And look, I know it's so easy to forget about your fire extinguishers, and it's like such a pain in the ass what to do with your fire extinguishers. But if you get boarded, say the Coast Guard boards you, they're going to check your fire extinguishers and what the dates are. You just keep them up. It's important. You may end up using them. I have knocked on wood in the 50 years that I've been sailing, never had a fire on board. And I've always tried to keep my fire extinguishers up. That was like always the lifeline right there. Now, another important part of the surveyor's job is looking at drainage. A lot of times we don't think about that. If you look at the overfills, if you look at the heads, and how they operate, and where's the stuff go? How do the pipes? Are they odor free? Is the water? How's the water? What's the water tank like? Is the water tank grounded? If it's stainless steel, there's all these little details that you may not be aware of when you're first buying a boat. You may just think, oh, that's great, and then you see this green wire, and you don't know what it is, and it's a grounding wire. Everything's got to be grounded in a boat, and a surveyor will, if he's really prudent and good, he will look at every single ground wire to make sure that they're up to code and to regulations, that they're clean, they're attached firmly. Because at the end of the day, if you get struck by lightning, and I've been struck by lightning, grounding your boat is going to be the most important thing you've ever done. So this is something you can keep up, and a surveyor will tell you if that needs to be looked at. And sometimes they come up with big projects for you. And when you first get a boat, you're gonna have projects, whether they're old boats or new boats. I built a San Lorenzo 120, and we had 1 million projects after we took delivery of the boat. And I'm talking about like electrical projects. I mean, not rebuilding stuff, but just sort of fine-tuning the boat. For example, they did this really weird thing, and if I hadn't been in the yard, I would have never figured it out. I ended up having all the electricity in the galley stopped, just shut off, and it was a fuse. Well, I had to get out the drawings and look for the fuse, but I remember having been in the yard every day and watched them put in all the panels, watched them, build the interior of the boat and all the rest of that. I remember that there was a panel that was in the dining room behind where we had at that time a cabinet where we kept dishes in, and I had to move the cabinet, and I had to get into this little porthole that was sort of tucked. You wouldn't have ever seen it. Even if you under close examination, found it, opened it up, pulled the door off, opened up the steel door, and there was all the fuses for the galley. And it was just like, so I replaced the fuse. But then I had to go find what caused this. And that turned out to be something that was going with the generator. And then there was another problem with the shore power. So there's endless things, even with a new boat, there's always endless things to be going through. And there's a very important thing with shore power that the surveyor will look at all your shore power cables and connections to the dock box, and just to see. And one of the things he's going to be checking for is not the two prongs, but the grounding prong, to see if there's any sort of heat signature or some destruction going on, because the ground off those dock boxes is usually the first thing that goes, and it'll cause a fire, and you don't want that to happen to your boat. So whether you're just a day sailor or you're going out to cruise the world, there's a lot to be learned, a lot of things to understand. I think one of the key things too is go get your captain's license, sit and take the courses. If you get a 6-pack license, it's great. You'll learn a lot. You'll learn a lot about how to navigate, and I'll get into a little bit more navigation in the coming podcasts. But just get your sea time. Start developing your sea time. Learn the things that the big boys on the big boats know, because all that's going to do, that's going to service you and make it feel you so good. You're going to know what the pollution thing is. That placard that you always have about pollution on the boat, study it, get to know it, know what it means. Okay. It will help you avoid a lot of serious problems. Know what MARPOL is. It's the International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution on Ships. And get to know what the International Maritime Organization is about. There's a lot of really wonderful things to do, but the surveyor is your first person that you meet, and he will be the first person that opens the world to you on professional maritime characters. And I think it's really important that you understand it, not be afraid of it. So in a quick recap, when you're going to buy a boat and the surveyors, be there, ask the surveyor questions. He's going to make a list for you, and he's going to give you a valuation of what he thinks the boat is. This can be good, this could be bad, just depends. It's up to the seller to make it, but the valuation will be what the insurance company goes by. And if you improve the boat, make sure you have the surveyor come back and take a look at it. I like to haul my boat out. I was using it extensively, so I was hauling my boat out approximately once a year, just to make sure that the bottom was clean and there was nothing wrong with the boat. I would do an extensive detailed survey myself. I've done that with mega yachts. Big job, lots of paperwork, Keep your log. Your log's going to make your boat worth more at the end of the day. And that's about all I have to say about surveying. I want to thank you all for tuning in. Please remember to go to Amazon and pick up my books. I'd be greatly appreciated. And if you want to check out the new article, new short story, The Importance of Place, you can find that at Live Encounters. And it's a online literary magazine. It's always great to get sailing stories in literary magazines. It's kind of a rare bird for literary magazines. And we'll be back. We'll be back in 2 weeks. Got a couple of more things going on. Much appreciated. Shout outs to Paulette McWilliams and her album. And I want to thank you for listening. Please please comment. If you're listening on Apple, please leave us a note, an Apple note, or you can reach me on offshoreexplorer.org, where all the podcasts are listed, and you can write a direct mail to me from there as a suggestion of topics or anything you want to say. Thank you. Safe sailing.